What's up you guys, Aditi? Welcome back to our channel. This video is a long overdue. I think people are gonna come at me if I don't make this video. So today I'm going to recommend 5 psychology books, like non-fiction psychology books. So let's begin. So the first book I'm going to talk about is related to cognition or thinking, and I've already made a video on that. And many people also ask me, like, where do I get all of this material from? And I would say that 80% of it is from the psychology textbook I have that has been recommended to me by my college professors, but a lot of the other information, like extra information that you see, that I would say that I get from reading such books. So the first book I'm going to talk about is this one. This is Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a very thick book, and it has really tiny font as well, I would say, but it's a good book. It explains the 2 types of thinking that I also mentioned in that video, like system 1 and system 2. So system 1 is fast, like effortless, and system 2 is effortful, it's slow. So it's because system 1 is fast, it's effortless, because we jump to conclusions, we use our intuitions and our past experiences, and we just know. And whereas the second type, so the system 2 or the slow effortful thinking, is where we would gather all the information, we would research, we would make a pros and cons list, everything, and then we make the decision. So this book explains both of these types of systems of thinking really well. He gives a lot of examples. I think he also spoke about how it happens biologically. I'm not really sure because I read this book in 2019, so it's at least been 2 years for sure. So I don't actually remember if I finished this book or not, because I remember that this book was good. I'm not going to lie. If I open a few pages, you can see that I have underlined stuff. I even highlighted things, and I don't really do that, but this was like my first psychology book I was reading, and I was not into in a psychology degree or anything back then, so I was quite excited to read this book. But I will say that this book is quite dry and it can get boring even if you're into cognition. I actually find cognition interesting, but while reading this book, I realized that maybe I don't really like cognition that much. Like you can see, I've been highlighted some stuff. So yeah, on to the next book. Okay, coming to the second book, I actually read it on Kindle. So I'm just gonna put it here, and then I'm gonna put the title of the book, the cover of the book on this. So it's Story of Psychology, and like the name suggests, it's about history of psychology. How did psychology come about? So it talks about from the historical point of view till I think today. Again, not really sure. I read this book a few months after I read this one, so it's been a while since I read these books. But I remember that that book, Story of Psychology, is a very big, thick, monstrous book of 900 pages. I'm so glad I don't have a copy of it, and it's a Kindle copy, but otherwise it's really difficult to carry that book around to read it. Also, because it's a psychology book and it's a 900 pages long book, I would suggest not to read it. Like, I don't think it's possible to read it in one go. Neither is this one, because when I've read so many of psychology books, I've realized that, I mean, I think it depends upon one's perspective, but my perspective of reading these books is to gather information, to get knowledge out of it. So it is sort of like studying, but not exactly studying, because you're not going to give your test or any of that sort. So whatever you can remember, you remember. Whatever you forget, you forget. So it was really hard for me to read both these books, Story of Psychology and Thinking Fast and Slow, really quickly. It took me a while to read, maybe a month or more, I'm sure. But Story of Psychology, I actually quit once, and then I picked it up again a few months later, and maybe I finished it. I don't really remember, but I remember that that book is very, very good for budding psychologists like you and me, or anyone who is interested in psychology. So that book, like I said, begins and talks about history. So history of psychology. So it starts from the Greek philosophers who asked and tried to answer the similar kind of questions psychology has, and that's how psychology has emerged from philosophy. So that's how that book really explains all of that well. It is a great reference book. That's what I felt like. It's a great reference book. It's something that you can read if you want to get into psychology, or maybe even if you are into psychology, because a lot of the stuff that I read in that book I did not study, obviously, because there's a lot of stuff and it's given in a lot of detail. It also talks about the tools and methods and theories, but the book does not explain how to apply those theories, because I think that's not the point of the book. The point of the book is to be something that just gives you the information, but it's not from an academic point of view. So in that way, I kind of like the book. A lot of people keep asking me which book should I read. Then I think I would suggest this book, because a lot of people are interested in knowing about psychology, so maybe you can read that book. I will say that that book is, again, it's quite boring and it's quite dry. It's dry, and that's the reason why it's boring. I found it a little boring. That's why I don't even remember if I finished it, and I quit once, like I said. But definitely give it a try. You don't have to read it in one go or in one sitting. You can stop and take breaks, and you can read it. You can even highlight and keep stuff, so you can go back to it and read all of that. And like I said, it's a great reference book, so I'm glad to have it as a reference book. Okay, so the third book of this video, so it is about habits, and I made a video on habits because I am quite interested into behavior and social psychology. So I kind of wanted to know about how we form habits and how we can change habits, alter them, quit, and why and how habits are formed. So this book, again, I read it on Kindle. This book is something that actually explains all of my questions. So I would actually recommend everyone to read this book, whether you are into psychology or not. If you're psychology students, you should read this book definitely. You can also watch the video, but the video is just a part of the book. I did not give a whole summary of the book, because that book explains a lot of things in detail. That's one. Secondly, I only spoke on an individual point of view in my video, but the book also gives it talks about corporates like companies and governments as well. So this book is just perfect for everyone. Anyone can read this book and they can get something or the other out of it. I kept mentioning about the last two books that how dry and boring they were. This book is nothing like that at all. This book is really interesting to read, that's one. The language flows really well. It's easy to understand, it's easy to grasp, and the research that has been provided in the book, it substantiates with the content. So it's a really, really good book. I did have one con about this book, which I remember when I was reading again. I read this book, I think in 2020 or by the end of 2019. I'm not really sure. I'll put it up on the screen. But the con was sort of, and maybe I found this book a little repetitive or something like that. I don't really remember, but if I don't remember the con, that means it's not really important. Let's just ignore that. Read this book. So the fourth book is Oliver Sacks' book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. It's my first Oliver Sacks book. Oliver Sacks was a neurologist, I forgot but he has written a lot of books. This is my first book. I've also read another book of his, which was a Kindle version, but I'm not going to talk about that because I prefer this book more than the other one. This book is not like a normal book like the other three. This book has short stories. Like the book is divided into 4 parts, and then there are stories in each parts. If I show you the content of this video, and this book the short stories are about different case histories or incidences of what his patients, like what they were going through, and his observations and conclusion and how he helped them. So if you are into biology and neuroscience, I'm sure you would like this book. So what I have done is, after I read the book and I found out about the what problems they had, what disorders or whatever their syndromes they had, I've written it down in pencil next to the title of the book, so that I know which story relates to which disorder or problems that they had. So if you read the title of this book, you're going to be like, oh, it's going to be a humorous book. It's not humorous, but this is like one of the stories in the book. Like, a man had visual agnosia. Now, visual agnosia is where it's a neurological disorder and you cannot recognize things for what they are, and you cannot recognize similar faces. So he had gone to this doctor, Oliver Sacks, and he saw his wife's hair and it looked like a hat to him. So he thought it's a hat, but it was his wife. So that's the short part I can tell you about why it's the man who mistook his wife for a hat. So it's a good book. It's like short stories, so you can read these heavy books and you can alternate between this and that. So I think it's a great read. So the last book is the most favorite book of mine. If I have to, if you ask me like which book did I like the most out of these 5, then I'm gonna say this book. And this book talks about social psychology. So we all know that humans are naturally social animals, but the question is why? Why are we wired to want to communicate and socialize with people? Why do we want people around? Is it just to procreate and to bear children, or is it a familial thing? Like, whatever. Why? So this book actually answers those questions. And the reason why I like this book the most out of all the other books is because this book is quite compelling. It's I won't say it's an easy read, but it's good for psychology students and someone who's interested in psychology, obviously. It talks about not just biology and psychology and philosophy, but it also goes beyond it. It goes to neuroscience and it talks about evolution as well. It also talks about autism. So if you know what autism is, it's known as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. So people who have autism or ASD are people who have difficulties in social interaction and communication. Like, they can't, if I make a happy face or if I make a sad face, they will not be able to recognize those emotions looking at my face, like looking at my facial expression. So this book does talk about it, like a chapter in this book does talk about it. And that is it for today's video. If you want a part 2 to this video, let me know. If you want me to review books, like psychology books, like 1 or 2 psychology books, instead of just recommending books to you, let me know. If you would want me to recommend some fictional psychology books, like psychology thriller ones, I really enjoy those more. And to be honest, I'm reading those kinds of books more than these kinds of books nowadays, because being a psychology student, I'm already studying about psychology. Upar se now, if I read about psychology as well in psychology books, it's like, it feels like studying again. So I prefer the psychological thriller kind of books more these days. So let me know if you want a recommendation of those books in the comment section. Hit the like button if you really liked my recommendations in this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next Friday with another psychology video.